While many printers have shifted their focus, Freeport Press has remained committed to the art of print. For companies that need a printing partner for magazines, look no further than Freeport Press. We offer the capabilities a customer would expect from a national printer while offering the level of customer service clients expect from a family-owned business. Freeport Press. We do print, and we do it well.
FreeportPress.com.
As much as we in media would like to be the authors of our own destiny, we're really chained to the eras that we move through. Our journalism has always been far better suited to long-form magazine with rich paper stock that you can't see through. And I think that's the format we should have always been in, but it's a great time for beautiful magazines. And I feel like the era has met us as much as anything.
Welcome to a new season of The Full Bleed. This year, we're going to be talking to makers and creators, of course, but also more about the business of magazines. Because let's face it, making a magazine is not easy. It never has been. But we're seeing more and more magazines in print out in the world. And there's a reason for that. At a time where the digital world is a messy place, and that's being polite, magazines are perfectly positioned as a part of an analog wave that is going to become more and more important in the media and even in marketing. We opened the season with Nathan Thornburgh from Roadside Kingdoms, a media brand that started out as a media brand, stay with me here, with the support of Anthony Bourdain, yes, that one, and then pivoted to becoming a kind of gastronomic tour company with loads of content on their website, and now has published their first magazine, and it won't be their last. Travel, especially these days, is pure analog, a completely human experience. It touches the senses in a way not many things can. Think about Anthony Bourdain's work and you think of how immersed he was everywhere he went, whether he was writing about the reality of a kitchen or filming a meal of noodles at a roadside stand in Thailand. He was all in. His was a very human-centered media, full of sights and smells and sounds and people. And that's what Roadside Kingdoms will try and replicate on the page, on every page. Sounds like a magazine. My name is Arjun Basu. Come take a journey with The Full Bleed. So before we get into Roadside Kingdoms, which is an epic story on its own, just in terms of the iterations you guys have gone through, I guess I just want to get a sense of who you are and what you did before we got to Roadside Kingdoms.
Yeah. God, sometimes I wish it was a little less epic. We could all use a little less epicness sometimes. But yeah, for me, it felt like a very natural evolution on some way. I started out as a musician and then started writing about music and then started writing about Al Gore's prescription healthcare plan in my music reviews for The Stranger and realized, I know, it did not work well.
Okay.
But it was around that campaign of 2000 that I became radicalized in favor of news writing. And I started freelancing for Time magazine and turned that into a 10-year career as an editor and foreign correspondent at Time. And I was just feeling the limitations and also the dissolution of big magazine media around the time that I ran into first Anthony Bourdain and then Matt Goulding in succession. And that really kind of sparked the idea of pivoting from foreign correspondence to something that included a little more food and joy and ultimately travel.
So when you met Anthony, what stage of his career was he at this point?
He was just on the cusp of ridiculousness.
Had the book come out yet, or?
Oh, sure. Yeah. This was at the beginning of his CNN days. So he had left the Travel Channel. I met him because I was pulled in to run the back of the book at Time, which was a celebrity interview section called 10 Questions. And celebrities suck. It was an awful job because, it was a parade of belittlers, either them or their handlers or agents. I mean, no good vibes until Tony walked in, having taken the subway there, and asked me more questions than I asked him. He wanted to know what we were eating in the Baghdad Bureau, what was happening at times. Such a curious dude. And also spoke, as people know him, to speak in full paragraphs, full of delight and sharp and angry and funny. And that was my first interaction with him. And when I met Matt, he'd also known Tony. I think he'd met him through Jose Andres, the Spanish chef. And we both were like, okay, if we're going to do this thing, I think Tony's really going to love it. Like a combination of food, because Matt was a food writer and editor, and foreign correspondence, just felt like it was in his wheelhouse. And we were right about that.
So when you say we're going to do this, what is this?
We were both looking for ways to get out of, I would say, legacy media. He was working at Men's Health and I was working at Time. This was 2009. And I'm sure you know this story.
The sun was setting at Time, a long time when you got there.
Yeah, I feel like I had just enough of the good days. I did know the drinks cart that they would push through when we were closing the magazine on Fridays. I had at times an unlimited budget to chase stories that I loved. And my big dream always, I'd lived in Russia as a younger person. My dream always was to go and lead the Time bureau in Moscow. And by the time I had enough juice in the office to actually do that, they did send me to Russia, but it was essentially to shut the bureau down. And one of the first things they did is not just shrink the foreign budget, but also, I think, reduce the beauty of the thingness of the magazine. The paper got impossibly thin quickly. And
yeah, I remember that. And all the magazines were doing that. I've taken to calling it a print panic. They're all wondering how to become like the internet when they weren't leaning into what makes magazines so great, the print part. So yeah, I mean, they were a part of that wave for sure.
That was exactly, and I think, not to fast forward, but so many of the decisions that we're making now are almost reactions 15 years later against that moment, and feeling like perhaps we've learned something. I'm not sure, but that's the hope.
Okay, so that brings us to the point where Roads and Kingdom become a thing, but it's been a lot of things. It's had a few iterations, but as a company, it's won Emmys, it's won National Magazine Award, it's won a James Beard, it has a book series. I'm thinking of Grateful Olive Pig. I'm looking at that and thinking my son's birthday is coming up and he would love that. And the website has, it's almost your mission that food can offer a tremendous window on humanity. So what was Roads and Kingdom and what is it now?
The thing that has remained the same is ultimately it's that founding idea of food and foreign correspondence. It's the founding duo. Also, it's me and Matt. He lives in Barcelona, but he's in New York today. And I just left him to come back and have this conversation. We were talking about a lot of the same things we have always talked about. What's the next move? How do we sustain this thing as a publication? But Anthony Bourdain did have a huge effect on the trajectory. We started just Matt and I. He came on shortly after that. And his agent, Kim Witherspoon, said at the time, he's a man of his word. He's really into what you're doing. He's going to give you his full support. But you should know, even without wanting to, he casts a long shadow over everything he loves. And she was incredibly prescient. So we had this wild roller coaster with him, which we published those books that you should absolutely get for your son under his imprint at HarperCollins. We got to film with him. That's where we crossed paths with television and Hollywood a little bit, which was super fun and a wild ride. But he was such a pirate. He would just take money from a luncheon he would do with Capital One and give it to us to publish absolutely unfundable journalism about lynchings of dog thieves in northern Vietnam. And that was an amazing thrill for us as journalists, but it also was not sustainable. So when he died in 2018, now he left us with a company that probably didn't have the strongest sustainable bones for journalism. And we had to just rebuild that. So that actually, we just were super depressed for a long time and, did not do much besides keep affairs going. But it was during the pandemic that we really started to recollect ourselves and imagine once we decided that we were going to continue to do this, and his family still owns a chunk of the company. We feel the legacy, we embrace it. We were on the phone with Jose Andres, who, again, I think had introduced Matt to Bourdain way back in the day. And he both offered to invest a little bit and gave us a great path forward as a company, which was to try to start this idea that we had talked about back when Tony was alive, which was culinary travel. And Jose was very right about that. It's a far better business if you do it right than media can be. And if we just kept our principles and tried to apply them to what travel could be, I think it ended up being also for us like very edifying and not just something to keep the business lights on. But we spent a number of years since the pandemic kind of focusing in on that and building a steady enough base that we could hire a few people like our editor, Charlie Wilder, and have the resources to jump back to where we always wanted to be, which is publishing. And now that has begun.
So when you became a tour company, let's just say, and you kept the content going, the website is just rich with really high quality content. And a lot of it is written by your, I don't know what you call them, your leaders, the people who lead the tours, some of it, because the crew that you've assembled, they're all listed on the website. Really quite an impressive, tremendous assemblage of talent. And which all leads us to this point where you are publishing a magazine that is perhaps it's another part of the ecosystem, but it feels like the purest sort of example of the ethos. How did you get to the point in terms of printing it? Like, why now? How is it tied to the overall business?
I think the main answer is, as much as we in media would like to be the authors of our own destiny, we're really chained to the eras that we move through. We incorporated in 2012, which was back when Vice was grifting VCs and everybody was going for scale. And the idea of charging for any kind of content really was out the window. If we had been born today, I think we'd be doing exactly what we're trying to do today. And our journalism has always been far better suited, as I think you were hinting at, far better suited to long form magazine with rich paper stock that you can't see through like old time magazine. And I think that's the format we should have always been in, but there was just no possibility really to do that back in 2012 and be a sort of viable media player. So I think in essence, the magazine is in what it is now for the same reason that you have this podcast, that you're talking to all of these really exciting and excited publishers and editors out there. It's a great time for beautiful magazines. And so I feel like the era has met us as much as anything. And that is, which is not to say that we're throwing everything at this part of the business. We are certainly, our hearts and souls are in the magazine, but they're all still very much in trying to create the best culinary tours on earth if we can. And we will continue to do both. But the magazine, which is right now an annual, and I would love for it to be more frequent if we can really understand the business and our audience in a good way. But it is a statement of purpose and who we are. And it's just, the whole thing is stitched together with a tremendous amount of love for journalism and storytelling that I think is probably common with a lot of the people you talk to.
Yeah, absolutely. And I do think that we are in a moment, and you said earlier that it's probably a reaction, and I tend to agree with you there too. And that reaction will only grow as the online world becomes floppier and floppier. Content in the magazine, though, like how independent is it? Running parallel to the rest of the business? Is it tied to the trips? You have the League of Travelers. You have this whole business. Is it a closed loop, or are they just like different tracks?
You would mention the contributors are the people who lead our trips. I actually think it's the other way around. We have always been going and looking for writers and producers and fixers to lead our travels because they are hands down the most interesting and connected people. So it was only natural that some of them would then be in the magazine itself, but we're very conscious of having the magazine not be a catalog of trips. There's some challenging reads. Imagine our trips are these very high-end culinary tours. My specific contribution to the magazine issue is a quite graphic 2-page spread about killing and cooking iguanas. Let's just say I'm not going to subject my beloved travelers to a flapping undead iguana spurting blood out of its neck. But that is also, I think, a really interesting story. It's an environmental story. It is a bit of a cooking story and a culture story, but that's a very small but one of many examples where we're really looking at this magazine as a publication for anybody, and definitely not just people who might come and travel with us one day. Our tours are quite expensive, so we know that there's the specific audience, and I know there's a lot of overlap. A lot of our travelers have really been excited about the magazine project, but we want this to stand alone in the biggest possible way.
Will the magazine be distributed? Will it be available in stores? Or
Yeah, absolutely. And we're starting, again, as you can tell with the annual nature of it, we are conservative by nature in the business side of things. So we're starting just with friends shops, thinking of Matt Sartwell at Kitchen Arts and Letters or Ken Conception at Now Serving. These are food-focused bookstores that have been hoping, I think, that we would be able to come up with something like this, and they're a natural fit. But we would definitely entertain larger distribution than that. It's not, again, we're fortunate in that I don't have to sell these out of the trunk of my car, sample CDs or something, but I really want them to get into as many hands as possible. On some level, we understand the boutique nature of life after corporate media, but also you need to honor the work and the incredible contributions of everybody from the designers to photographers and writers, and just do our part, get it out there, get it in the hands. So I think distribution's a part of it. It's one of the beauties of independent media is you just learn something totally new each year, it feels. And now I got to learn about distribution channels for this kind of product.
if there's one thing in common with everyone I've spoken to on this show, going back, this is the first show of the 5th season, but going back, 4 seasons, it's that the distribution just is a bit.
Yeah. And I do think, though, the bedrock of this will still and always be the people who have been with us throughout. And it is one of the things that makes me optimistic about this era is there is an understanding that the people now who are fans of something know that it's on them to support it. And we have to give them reasons and mechanisms and so on. But it's so much more of a team effort than it ever was in any other media that I was involved with. And I started out at The Stranger in Seattle, which is an alt news weekly with a very loyal following. But even then, our readers felt like they had to keep The Stranger in business. That's what porn ads were for. And it's a much more direct relationship now. And I'm thrilled about that.
Yeah, I think about Time magazine. I remember having a conversation with my brother-in-law's mother-in-law. Yeah. And she was complaining about the price increase of Time. And I was already in the business, so I knew how much magazines cost to make. And the price increase, she was still paying less than the cost of shipping.
Yeah.
Essentially. But for her, the price increase was too much. And that was when I understood something about value and what readers value and how they value it. And I realized that the magazines aren't really thinking about readers. That's when I realized that the magazines are only thinking about the advertisers. And the readers are just the data point. And that's what ended up happening a few years later. But I'm happy to see that there's one ad.
I think we have 3, but
Oh, is there?
point taken. We have,
I forgot the inside front cover. Yeah. It's not GM here.
Yeah, exactly. And to be honest, like that was more a statement that we would like to continue to find those good partners like Mighty Oak or Rugby Scott that are boutique and independent themselves. But I don't believe this paradigm that you were talking about before with Time Magazine just losing an absolute bucket on each edition so that they could sell a full page ad for $80,000 to a car or pharma company. That's far from what we aspire to, but I don't want to close out commerce altogether. I do think that is a possible base of support And one thing, we are hoping to have a discipline that I did not back in the Bourdain days, where we have a firm base and we're not just taking money from somewhere else and throwing it into publishing. We want the publishing to stand on its own legs.
We'll be right back.
Hi, this is Jeremy Leslie at MagCulture. We're proud to support The Full Bleed because we love magazines too. Visit magculture.com and see why print is far from over. It's just getting started. Read the journal for interviews and reviews, listen to our podcasts, visit our shop in London and online, and come to our live events in London and New York. We love magazines. Subscribe to our newsletter for weekly updates, all at magculture.com.
Print is Dead is made possible by the support of the Society of Publication Designers. The SPD powers the future of visual storytelling, setting the standard for editorial excellence and shaping the future of visual culture. For more information, visit spd.org.
So you talked about Anthony Bourdain's The Long Shadow and the editorial in this issue. It's touching. It really is. I was not expecting it, and I read it, and I had to put the magazine down.
Thank you for saying that. That's a credit to Matt Goulding, my partner, who wrote that. And yeah, the piece you're referring to is our letter from the editor, essentially.
Exactly.
But yeah, we've had this kind of ghost editor for now, however many years, 7 years, and I wouldn't change a thing. I love the world that we got to experience together with him, and he was exactly the guy that everybody thinks they know from television in my experiences with him. So there's a lot of love and fondness in that, but definitely one thing that I'm always making sure that we don't do is invoke him in ways that we feel would have just been crass or overly commercial. He was a capitalist. We did embark on a lot of capitalist adventures with him. So it's not that he would hate commerce, but he's just not here. He can't tell us. And I'm always very open with people. The first time I brought up the idea of culinary tours, his reaction was, that's a fucking nightmare. Like following a red umbrella across the piazza, like the Gosling of the Damned or something. He was not an immediate fan of the idea. And I think I talked him into seeing it more as like a production size crew and with a week-long narrative mission. But ultimately, if we're out there drinking wine at some sun-kissed vineyard in Sicily, it's not a highly Bourdainian moment. But we also have done trips to Angola and things where I'm like, oh yeah, he would love that we had managed to make this work. I have my ideas of what his opinions would be, but I think we knew that when we started this, as you called it, and I think aptly, this purist form of the journalism that we do, we really felt his presence in a lot of that. We put also a piece that he had edited into the magazine, also as an homage and one more link and tie to it. But I think as we continue to publish more, it'll have a different flavor. But this first one, we really wanted to stop and reflect on his legacy in all of this.
Yeah, because I'm just thinking I could feel it from your iguana story to the story from Nigeria about the fish and the writer talking about her mother's abuse and then her physical abuse and then the business she ran, to the Jose Andres Stella story. So you got this really the bloody and the spiritual going. So that's the alpha and the omega.
And certainly Matt and I and Tony, we all had that common feeling that stories can talk about tough stuff and you can pivot from stockfish, as you said, in Nigeria to domestic abuse and have really hard conversations around the table. And that actually makes it more interesting. So that, again, is as little as I can say how he would feel about our choices, X, Y, and Z. There is that ethos that I think I recognize in him and really in a lot of the people who've worked with us over the years.
And so one of the things that I think Rodent Kingdom has always done is it's never shied away from a political stance. Never. You have the Banned Countries Dinner Series, and now you have the Anti-Ice Supper Clubs. And how much of that you can't really do it in an annual because you never know what's going to happen, especially these days. You just never know what's going to happen. But how much of that is going to infuse the publication or Have you thought of that?
Yeah, it's a good question. We also have launched alongside this annual print publication, a digital things. Basically, will be a newsletter-based publication, which will be 2 or 3 times a week and will just be ongoing throughout the year. But even then, I don't think we would ever stay very closely to the headlines. We're always still looking for kind of good storytelling that might get out of the panic of the moment. But we make lots of decisions that are probably not great for expanding the umbrella or something. And particularly, we were concerned when we started having a hefty dose of the business relying on these sort of high cost tours. Will our politics feel rough or punk on some level? But almost the opposite. Obviously, there are large segments of MAGA America that might like to have a nice Chianti in Sicily, but they're not going to what we have to say about fishermen's unions there. And I feel very comfortable with that because we have a huge number of people, or certainly large enough number, who take these trips at this higher price that really value that we say exactly what we mean. And that includes on Gaza, includes certainly with ICE. And we're I would say the biggest impediment to me, like really focusing on my work as a publisher and journalist, is that I am so distressed at times about the world and like the need to do something, and just seeing how life is incredibly difficult for people right next door. And I think that, to my mind, is part of the reason why we're investing not just in the publishing, but in this series of fundraisers, which is starting at the end of January in LA. But yeah, and it's called the Anti-ICE Supper Club. There's not much doubt. It's not, let's all hold hands for immigration. My point is, fuck those guys and what they're doing. And if we have any power, and it's so small, but we just have to do something and just hope it is a one drop in what I hope is a large enough ocean.
Food can offer a tremendous window on humanity, right? That's it right there.
Yeah. And as soon as we went out with that idea to LA, we got Daniel Patterson, who's a 2 Michelin star chef and is doing a private dinner at his home to support this. And also Bricia Lopez, who runs Guelaguetza, which is a Oaxacan powerhouse restaurant. And they were immediately on board. And I was like, it's called Anti-ICE Supper Club. Is that safe for you guys? Is it safe for your staff in there? Absolutely. I think Daniel, he said, I'm only going to call it that if I can't call it the Fuck ICE Supper Club. We're finding that in the food world, there are also fellow travelers. There are people who are as outraged and passionate and trying to use their incredible skill set to do something good.
Oh, I imagine in the food world, especially so. Given what a lot of the kitchens are, the composition of many of the kitchens.
On the front line, absolutely. And I should say that Jose, who came on as an investor after Tony, is kind of exhibit A. Jose Andres has married Michelin star dining with an incredible, mobile, dynamic soup kitchen approach, unlike anybody on earth. And so it's very easy for us to fall into believing that chefs can rise to these moments.
I keep waiting for him to win the Nobel Prize. I think he will one day.
He's got my vote, put it that way.
This is a different space here, but I feel about travel content now. What are your feelings about it?
I was listening to your conversation actually with Kate at Ori and also with the makers of Fair magazine. They both said something that I was vigorously nodding my head like a crazy person on the subway should too, which is that I think this has made what we do much easier and more valuable, because I think we're about to see the floor absolutely drop on digital content, just in terms of, and I'm not saying that it's going to be a smaller business or predicting anything like that, but just from a consumer feeling of, is this true? Did that actually happen? Does this person know what they're talking about? Which is one question, but is that even a person is a whole other question. And I think that really, for us who have a known identity, who are actual humans who've been in this game for a while or who are producing something of heft, I feel like it's a really good moment. Although I have seen, now that I'm all crazy for print and everything, I've seen like the algorithm is feeding me advertisements for print magazines that I think are not actually print magazines. They might be print on demand, but they seem like also a bot-driven scam. Probably know about this more than I do.
I think everything's a bot now, but
Yeah.
when you can go to a leading online bookstore and search for books, and the first 4 books are not the actual book you're looking for, but summaries, quick notes, and or an AI generated whatever, it gets harder. The only way you know if you're getting a real book is going to a bookstore. And I think magazines, they're in a bit harder place, but that gets you back to distribution. And not every store sells a magazine, at least in most places. So yes, this is why we're seeing a rise in magazines, and why I think Roads and Kingdoms are coming out at the right time. But it's also going to be hard to distinguish because people are still convenience. Look, everything is happening now because we sacrificed quality at the altar of convenience, and we're going to pay for it forever. Look, we're paying for cars, right? So we're going to pay for it forever. And it's just a matter of figuring out how to not get scammed by what's out there. You guys are very well positioned because, again, a lot of my guests, they do things in real life. They have events. They meet their readers. You have magazines who are small magazines based in New York. They go to LA and they get like 1,000 people, or they go to Paris. I mean, the experience of being a part of the community, and that's another key word, of course, is that magazines are centers of communities and create their own communities. And I think that's where those are all those human elements that are going to win the day. It's why magazines have great swag shops. Now, I have a brand background too, and I think from a brand positioning point of view, that's where it is. You create community and loyalty, and then those people become your evangelists.
I should have worn my Racket magazine hoodie to this interview, but you are absolutely correct.
So you talked a little bit about your customers. Who are they?
Yeah, back when we were a fully free online purveyor of Uzbek goat herd articles, we surveyed our readers, and I found them to be generally lovable dirtbags who had not much money, but a great sense of adventure. Many were in their first jobs after college and looked back fondly on their more adventurous selves, and we had a lot of that in common. I thought there would be very little overlap with this kind of interregnum small group of people on these culinary tours, but actually a lot of them were there. They were just waiting to find something like this, some expression of Roads and Kingdoms that also fit into something that they were able to do as mid-career people. We are mostly American, I think, in our readership and in our travelers. I think they both are around 70%. A little bit less. I think we skew a little more female, at least in our online readers and in our travelers. And I think for also, not that this relates necessarily to the magazine, we'll see, but the average age of our travelers is actually quite young for what I would say group travel is, in part because these are short, intense trips of a week long, and they're meant for people who are mid-career, although we have some amazing retirees who will lap me any day hiking up the steps. And I do think that's a reflection of how we set it up. These are energetic travels, and we get people across the spectrum, but that's the basic approach. Also just vacation styles. Oh my gosh. Like I have many friends in Europe who are like, wait, you fly somewhere for a week or 2 weeks? What do you mean you don't get the camper van and go down to the lake for 3 months? Part of it is the American style, which also is the Mexican corporate style. So we do have Mexican travelers and people from Southeast Asia also who are involved in that. We're always looking to expand the umbrella. And as you probably know, my partner Matt lives in Barcelona. We've always been by capitals between New York and Barcelona, but really it's an American publication, North American publication, I would say. I don't want to leave Canadians out here.
Thank you for that.
Yeah.
So what's your favorite food experience in the world?
This is going to sound incredibly bloodthirsty, but we had a string of putting these tours together where I think we had killed a ruminant on 4 tours in a row. And I was very happy about that. Not because I have anything against goats and lambs, but my uncle was a goat farmer, actually a cheese maker and goat farmer. And I had the experience of slaughtering and cooking animals with him. So it's like on a autobiographical level, it's very meaningful, but I just know in each of those places where we were doing it, which is like Angola, Morocco, Mexico, Italy, it means that you're into something that's already very special and festive. That's obviously, but sacred and also highly educational, even for someone like me who's been around it since I was young, but it still is such an important reminder of where meat comes from. That sounds incredibly obvious, but
I 100% agree with you. I think every meat eater, which is most of us, should witness or even participate in the killing of their food once.
yeah, absolutely. And it stays with you. One thing, we don't pass the knife around. I will say that because you owe the animal the respect of the best possible butcher they can slaughter or they can have. And then after the animal's dead, we do a lot of the preparation of the animal together as a group, because at that point it's a bit moot for the goat. But that to me is my favorite experience because it's communal, it's epic, it's religious, it's a lot of things.
I just thought of the water buffalo scene in Apocalypse Now, which is all of those things. It's communal, it's epic, it's religious, it's all of those things. What's your favorite place in the world?
Oh, I don't know. Ask me, please, who my favorite child is. I would have an easier time answering that. Actually, no. I've always subscribed, and I don't know if this is because I was in these kind of particularly post-conflict zones a lot, always subscribed to the idea that there's no great city, there's just a great moment. They all have these different moments that are so rich, and I got to live in Havana in 1999, and I thought that was a pretty spectacular moment for that city. And then as you can see today, Cuba's in a very different place. So the answer to that is always moving. So that's my caveat. I have to say that Georgia and Angola were the two places that have dominated my dreams the most and really taught me the most about, particularly about the trips business and what hospitality can look like, what these trips can be, how meaningful, and the level of enthusiasm that they can have. So those are two places right now that are in these really special moments and very quite distinct. Angola's coming out of the war after 20 years and feeling very confident and open and young and excited. And Georgia's in a very determined mood, defending itself and its culture in a tricky moment, but still one that they're meeting with flagons of wine and long tables of skewered meat. And I'm so in love with that people in that country.
I just want to clear it up for the people who may be slightly confused. You're talking about Georgia on the Black Sea and not the Georgia that is.
Thank you. Yes. I think they're thinking of rebranding it because these conversations, I always forget almost that people will assume the state.
Yeah. Georgia, the country, has been around for thousands of years, and for them to have to change their name because of a Johnny come lately.
We're all children of St. George, and I think they just have to deal with that.
What are your 3 favorite magazines or media right now?
Definitely print magazines, and in part for selfish reasons to some degree, because I think they've shown me the way, literally. And I think I've got a hoodie from one of them. It's Caitlin Thompson's Racket magazine. She actually worked with me at Time. So to see her kind of lead and go into print and have it be gorgeous and stylish, I mean, in a very fashion forward way, I thought was incredible. Mike Rogge at Mountain Gazette, I think is really good at communicating the story of the magazine and the why of it. And he's been a tremendous help to me personally, as Caitlin has, and just pointing the way. And actually, not just because I was just reading or listening to Cade Critchko's episode, but Cade had actually written for us as when we were getting digital pitches and publishing for Roads and Kingdoms. And I'm really psyched and in a strange way proud to see Ori magazine do what it does, because I think he's also has some very creative takes on what a magazine can be. So those in terms of content, they maybe occupy a fairly similar slice of the world of human thought, but they really have had a huge impact on me as a publisher, just putting together this magazine, feeling the confidence that I can feel that, okay, there's an audience for this. You can make it great, and you can actually make a business.
I wish Roads and Kingdoms much success, and I thank you for being on our show today.
You're a part of it. Thank you for highlighting print and making that a thing. That's how we build on this. So thank you, Arjun.
This has been The Full Bleed, a podcast about the future of magazines and the magazines of the future, and a production of Magazium LLC. This episode was produced by Patrick Mitchell. The theme music was composed and played by Jason Camelot. If you'd like to comment on this show, send an email to hello@magazium.co or visit our website at magazium.co, where you can read transcripts of all of our interviews from all of our podcasts, along with portfolios, archival photos, links, and more. You can also tell us what the mags you miss. Just fill out the form on the website. Once a month, we'll select the name of a lucky person, and they could win some fine swag. Speaking of which, we have a swag shop. My name is Arjun Basu. Thanks for listening.